Hello and welcome to a First Post POV. In the early hours of Friday morning, Israel launched an unprecedented airstrike on Iran's nuclear and missile facilities. This is something they've never done before. At least 6 military bases and locations in Iran have been struck, and Israel claims they used 200 fighter jets, flew all the way across Syria, Iraq and Jordan to strike these targets in Iran. Like I said, these attacks brought West Asia to the brink of war. The question is, why did Israel choose to strike now? How will Iran respond? And will these strikes be enough to degrade Iran's nuclear capabilities? To answer these questions, let me introduce my guest, Mr. Eylon Levy, who is a former spokesperson of the Israeli government. Thank you so much, Mr. Levy, for speaking to us. Let's talk about these attacks and how long they're expected to continue first. Prime Minister Netanyahu says there is no timeline. They will go on as long as it's necessary to degrade Iran's capabilities. Some US officials have been speaking to American media saying they could go on for 14 days. How long do you expect them to continue?
Nobody knows how long Israel's operation will continue to remove the threat of the Iranian nuclear weapons program and ballistic missiles. But what Israel can say is it was now or never. Israel is acting at absolutely the last moment, while Iran is a whisker away from getting nuclear weapons, with diplomacy having failed, knowing that if it doesn't take advantage of this narrow window of opportunity, the Iranian regime will have nuclear weapons. And a state that is openly committed to Israel's destruction cannot be allowed to have the weapons with which to wipe it out.
You say that diplomacy failed, but the fact is there were talks scheduled for Sunday, which is day after tomorrow, the 6th round of talks between Iranian and American negotiators over a nuclear deal. So talks were happening, but it seems like you went ahead and attacked anyway.
And in those weeks, Iran dragged out the negotiations without ceding an inch about its enrichment. And that is why President Trump tweeted just now, "We gave Iran a chance to negotiate in good faith. They didn't take it." The US says we gave Iran 60 days, an ultimatum. Now is day 61. So the US is backing Israel's action against Iran because it knows that the Iranian regime wasn't negotiating in good faith. It never had any intention of ending its uranium enrichment because the Iranian regime wants nuclear weapons. And if Israel hadn't stepped in to stop it, that's exactly what it would have done.
There are some reports in Israeli media that say that there was some sort of collusion happening between the Americans and the Israelis. I believe it was in the Jerusalem Post that they said that the talks or the nuclear deal talks that were happening in Oman were just a facade and that the intention was always to launch a military operation against Iran. So basically, the negotiations were a ruse to turn the attention away towards the diplomatic front and away from the military front. Is that something you think happened in the days leading up to this operation?
I don't think the American participation in the negotiations was a ruse because obviously everyone wants to avoid war. War is bad. But a nuclear Iran is the worst case scenario. So the Americans gave the Iranians a chance to negotiate in good faith. They said you must shut down your enrichment program so you cannot have a path towards nuclear weapons. But the Iranian regime stretched out those negotiations while enriching enough highly enriched uranium for nearly 10 nuclear bombs, accelerating their ballistic missile program, stepping up their moves towards weaponization, and they were trying to deceive the United States. So the West gave diplomacy a chance, and now the Iranians have an opportunity, now that the Iranian nuclear facilities are being attacked, to negotiate in good faith.
You say it's now or never, but the fact is, as recently as last month, American intelligence suggested that Iran was not interested in building a nuclear bomb and that their preference was to have talks with the Americans and to reach some sort of agreement. Is that not true?
Iran has uranium enriched to 60%. There is no possible civilian purpose for 60% enriched uranium. It's not used for peaceful energy. The only thing that 60% enriched uranium is used for is nuclear weapons. And the United States relies on Israel for intelligence because Israel is the eyes and ears of the United States in the Middle East. In 2007, Israel took out Bashar al-Assad's secret nuclear reactor in Syria. The Americans didn't know about it. It was Israeli intelligence that exposed that the Syrian regime was working on nuclear weapons. And now Israeli intelligence is saying, we've picked up on Iranian attempts to accelerate ballistic missiles, accelerate the weaponization, accelerate enrichment, and it's now or never, because if Iran got a nuclear bomb, it would be too late.
We just heard from the US President a short while back. He said that it's better right now for Iran to come to the table and to agree to the sort of deal that Israel wants. And if not, more brutal attacks could be loading for the Iranian government. Now, is that something that Israel also shares as a war goal? Or do you want the complete degradation of Iran's nuclear capabilities? Is that non-negotiable for you?
Israel would like nothing more than for Iran to peacefully give up its nuclear weapons program and enrichment capability. If the Americans can achieve that through diplomacy, fantastic. The Israeli people don't want war. We know that an Iranian retaliation is going to mean hundreds of ballistic missiles. We're going to be running to bomb shelters. We're going to have sleepless nights. Buildings may be destroyed and people will be killed. But Israel has taken this dramatic decision because it says, as bad as a war would be, an Iranian regime that wants to destroy Israel, that has the weapons to destroy Israel, would be even worse. And that's a risk that we can't take. So Israel would love for this to be solved diplomatically and peacefully, but the Iranians are hell-bent on getting nuclear weapons, and they have not been negotiating in good faith.
Now, you were in government recently, you were a spokesperson for the Israeli government, and this particular operation that happened today is something that Israel has been wanting to do for a long time, ever since Iran started pursuing a nuclear program. I'm wondering what you heard in the corridors of power when you were in government, in the Israeli government, about this operation. Was there active conversations about such an operation, or do you think it's happened a bit recently? Tell us what you can about what you heard when you were in government.
Since the Iranian regime started its nuclear program, Israel has been clear it cannot get nuclear weapons and will be stopped one way or another, preferably diplomacy, but with the military option if diplomacy fails. Just look at how sophisticated last night's operation was. The precision strikes against Iranian military leaders, the attacks on the Iranian nuclear facilities using drones that were released inside Iran itself. It's clear to any military analyst that these plans were a long time in the making. And Israel decided now, at the absolute last minute, as Iran is on the cusp of nuclear weapons and diplomacy has failed, that it had to put into action those plans that it's clearly been working on for a long time.
But do you also fear that such a blatant attack on Iranian nuclear facilities could be counterproductive, in the sense that the Iranians would now decide it's time to update our nuclear principles and to actively build that bomb because the Israelis are attacking us at will?
Trying to destroy the Iranian nuclear facilities that they would need to build a nuclear bomb. The purpose of the operation is to block Iran's path to nuclear weapons, because until now it had a clear path to nuclear weapons and that had to be cut off.
A lot of people are also talking about the double standard here. Israel says that Iran has an illegal nuclear program and therefore it should be dismantled. But the fact is, Israel does have a covert nuclear program, according to many experts and even former government officials. It's a bit rich then for Israel to say that Iran should not have a nuclear program, isn't it?
The Iranian regime is actively threatening the destruction of a sovereign state. The Iranian leaders lead crowds in chants of death to America and death to Israel at every public gathering. The Iranian supreme leader said recently Israel is a cancer that must be eliminated.
If I'm hearing you right, are you suggesting that the illegal nuclear program is not the problem per se, but the problem is that Iran, a country that rivals Israel, has an illegal nuclear program? Is that the problem here?
The problem is that a hostile regime that is openly committed to the annihilation of Israel is pursuing the weapons with which to annihilate Israel. That is an existential threat that Israel cannot tolerate. And I dare say, even though Arab leaders have been publicly condemning Israel, behind the scenes they are all relieved that Israel is eliminating this threat to the entire region.
A lot of people would also argue that the root of this conflict between Israel and Iran lies in the issue of Palestine and the fact that Israel keeps denying Palestinians their statehood and the two-state solution. And that if that happened, then this rivalry between Israel and Iran would not be problematic. How would you respond to that?
The root of the conflict is that Israel wants to exist and the Iranian regime does not want Israel to exist. It's really that simple. There used to be flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran before the Islamic Revolution in the end of the 1970s. And since then, there is a radical regime committed to a theocratic, violent vision that wants to impose its rule over the whole Middle East, that is committed to Israel's destruction. Not a peace deal with the Palestinians, not changing the borders, not political reform, the destruction of the Jewish state. So there are two ways you solve it. Either Israel stops existing, or the Iranians stop trying to make it stop existing. And Israel says, we're here, we're existing, we're going to defend our people and our survival.
Well, things are certainly heating up. These are long-term rivals who've always wanted to have a go at each other. And right now, the shadow war has completely turned into the open. It's a dangerous situation. And looking at it from here in India, we certainly hope that calmer heads prevail in West Asia. But thank you so much, Mr. Eylon Levy, for speaking to First Post.